you know, overly hurt by it. I did do my best to kind of limit some of the more offensive material. So it's mostly focused on like quotes and things from academics for the most part. So yeah. Okay, so the reason I've called this what I have, Sissy Hypno, Forced Feminization, and the fetishization of women's oppression, is because Sissy Hypno is in itself a subgenre. It's not the main umbrella of the category, which is forced feminization. So Sissy Hypno is just one aspect. There are a lot of different aspects and a lot of different genres that fall under forced feminization. And of course, the fetishization of women's oppression, women being reduced to pornography. Okay, so what is Sissy Hypno? This comes from an academic named Astor Gilbert, published in Duke University Press last year. Sissy Hypno, which promises to transform the viewer into a sissy through hypnosis instructions. FetLife, the online fetish community, defines a sissy as a male-identified person who engages in feminization and sometimes humiliation in order to reach a different emotional or mental state. Sissification and feminization are forms of gender play in which the subject takes on the dress of the opposite gender. But sissy is also claimed by trans women as an identity. In this way, sissy connotes a hyper-feminine presentation regardless of sex or gender. He goes on to say that it engages a male viewer by way of addressing them directly within the style of the video as a form of hypnosis featuring calm narration, countdowns, and repeated suggestions to direct the viewer's thoughts. The narrator hypnotist encourages viewers to become a woman through inviting them to identify with the women on screen. Through this process, the video constructs the subject of the sissy as a trans subject. In sissy fetish practices, the man is often humiliated by a female dominatrix who plays out a forced feminization fantasy. Men are encouraged to imagine having sex with other men, but as a woman rather than as a man, as in traditional gay pornography. The viewer begins as a man and undergoes a transformation into a sissy or woman. So they're equating women here with sissy. This is a photo of Astor Gilbert. This is from a university website where he is a PhD student. He attended Columbia College in Chicago. You can see the credentials. This is a serious academic who is in the field of pornography. You can see at the bottom here, Astor's areas of study include porn studies. So that's something that is in universities these days. There are things like porn studies that you can get degrees in and speak about. Astor Gilbert actually spoke at the National Women's Studies Association. This is another definition of sissy hypno, again from another academic. This is Andrea Long Chu, who published a book called Females, again, trans-identifying male. To be sissy is always to lose your mind. The technical term for this is bimbofication. Captions often instruct viewers to submit themselves to hypnosis, brainwashing, brain melting, dumbing down, and other techniques for scooping out intelligence. The gestures most often looped in GIF format almost always register the evacuation of will, wilting faces, trembling legs, eyes rolled back into heads. Even the GIF format itself communicates this, distilling the femaleness to its barest essentials, an open mouth, an expectant asshole, blank, blank eyes. And I guess Andrea Long Chu is kind of known among some gender critical feminists these days for having claimed that sissy pornography made him trans. So this is an idea that's kind of been floating around and is being put out there. If you've ever seen sissy porn, you'll know that turning people female is exactly what sissy porn says it does. Also known as forced feminization or forced femme, sissy porn seems to have begun on Tumblr around 2013. This is also important because the proliferation of this content on social media is really an increasing trend. Sissy porn's central conceit is that the women depicts are former men who have been feminized by being forced to wear makeup, wear lingerie, and perform acts of sexual submission. Captions instruct viewers to understand that the very act of looking at sissy porn constitutes an act of sexual degradation, with the implication that whether they like it or not, viewers will be transformed into females themselves. This makes sissy porn a kind of meta-pornography, that is, porn about what happens to you when you watch porn. And I highlighted this because that's something I actually agree with. I agree with Andrea Long Chu about this in the sense that pornography does have an impact on the way that someone can view themselves. And that's kind of the whole reason why I'm talking about this. Okay, so finally, this is the last quote of Andrea Long Chu that I'll be showing you, where he basically reduces women to a sex object. He says, at the center of sissy porn lies the asshole, a kind of universal vagina through which femaleness can always be accessed. Getting fucked makes you female because fucked is what a female is. Sissy porn did make me trans. I feel like this quote is very telling. It very neatly summarizes what the main premise of sissy porn is, and to a larger extent, what the redefinition of women means according to gender ideology, which is that not even a sex object, but an action of sex, a fantasy of sexual submissiveness. I think if more people were aware of this, there would be a lot more anger, but this is being promoted in academia, so maybe people aren't aware of it for that reason. And Andrea Long Chu has presented this idea at several reputable universities in the US. You can see the titles here: Uncritical Bottoming. Bottoming, by the way, refers to a sexual position. Especially in BDSM, for example, you might have a top or a bottom, depending on, you know, your preference of position. And this is UC Berkeley. He also presented this at Vassar College, which is traditionally a women's only university. He was invited there by the feminist organization within the university, UCLA, as well as Columbia.
Oh my gosh, he was invited by the feminist organization
Yes.
within
Yes, a
Vassar?
feminist, yes.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's really important to not understate the extent to which feminist organizations have been captured by this out of whatever reason, a desire to be nice, or I'm not really sure exactly all of the reasons behind it. So the Human Rights Campaign published this PDF in 2016, which is still on their website. It's called Safer Sex for Trans Bodies. And in it, you can see that women's anatomy is referred to as a front hole. We use this word to talk about internal genitals, which is not even totally anatomically correct, but front hole may self-lubricate depending on age and hormones. To me, that feels really passive-aggressive. But you might also notice that vagina is used to talk about the genitals of trans women who have had bottom surgery. And when this was published in 2016, there were a lot of people who were rightly upset about it, but I don't think what they seem to realize is that front hole is a reference to back hole. It's actually being defined, as Andrea Long Chu says, in reference to the asshole. In order to have a front hole, you have to have a back hole. And also, it's not anatomically correct either. The first hole of a woman's body would be the urethra. So it's not even correct. And it has this kind of connotation of pornography in this term as well. So in forced feminization pornography, expanding out, you know, beyond just the sissy hypno, there is all of these different genres that you have, and every aspect of the female body and experience, as well as stereotypes about women, can be fetishized. For example, you might have pregnancy pornography, lactation, menstruation, of course, lesbian orientation is commodified, puberty and adolescence, which we can see in the adult baby diaper lovers, which is, you can see online that there's a connection between trans identification and kind of objectification of adolescence. Becoming physically weaker, becoming emotional, both of which they will say that HRT does, as well as rape fantasies and sex trafficking. So an example of rape fantasies and sex trafficking is the book Whipping Girl by Julia Serrano, which was published in 2007. It was acclaimed as a feminist book. And this is an excerpt from that book. While I never really believed the cliche about women being good for only one thing, I found that that sentiment kept creeping into my fantasies. In my late teens, I would imagine myself being sold into sex slavery and having strange men take advantage of me. Most of my fantasies began with my abduction. I turned to putty in the hands of some twisted man who would turn me into a woman as part of his evil plan. It's called forced feminization, and it's not really about sex. It's about turning the humiliation you feel into pleasure, transforming the loss of male privilege into the best fuck ever. Important to notice here that humiliation is a common theme among all of this, that being treated as a woman is one of the most degrading experiences you can have, and therefore plays really strongly into BDSM fetishes. Here's just a couple of examples of things that are called sissy captions, sometimes called TG captions. The first one is from Instagram, and it says, I just have to make you like this permanently, throw out all your male things and run to the pharmacy for female hormones. The second one is from Twitter. I'm sorry for the language of this. Again, this is where the traumatizing part might come in for some people. But basically they're saying that it's their fantasy to be sex trafficked. And a couple more examples of this, which I'm just sharing again, because I think one of the problems I have talking about this issue is people don't tend to believe me. So I thought I'd back this up with a few images from social media, reblog, if the thought of being a prostitute turns you on. You admit that you are a sissy who wants to be pimped out. The second one uses the trans flag colors and says you wanted to be a whore. I paid for your feminization, breast implants, and hormones. So this is not an outlier. If you search certain terms in social media, you can easily find things like this. So this is relevant to the point that major organizations are promoting what they call sex work, especially using trans rights as the guide or which to do it. ACLU is one of the big ones. And you can see here that where it says sex work is real work, they've used the trans flag behind it. They tweeted this other one on the Trans Day of Remembrance. So the push to decriminalize sex trafficking totally is also being done with, trans rights as the justification behind it. This is a quote from Janet Mock, and he's a prominent trans activist in the US, male, trans-identified. These women taught me, and here referring to women sex trafficked, but especially men who identify as women in the sex industry. These women taught me that nothing was wrong with me or my body, and that if I wanted, they would show me the way. And it was this underground railroad of resources created by low-income, marginalized women that enabled me when I was 16 to jump in a car and choose a pathway to my survival and liberation. So basically, teen sex trafficking here being referred to as an underground railroad.
An underground railroad of resources?
Yeah.
For him to use like fucking sex tips and beauty tips? I mean,
I don't know exactly what's meant by that, but possibly as in like a support network for understanding his own internalized female identity possibly is what he means there, I suppose. Although it should be noted that within the community of trans-identified males who are in the sex industry, often the money that they might receive from doing that would go towards things like breast implants, hormones, and so on. So one of the reasons it's promoted is because it allows men to get financial resources to feminize, quote unquote, feminize themselves. And of course, the result of that is you have publications like Teen Vogue promoting sex trafficking towards children. This is a trans activist in the UK, Munro Bergdorf, who also promotes the decriminalization of the sex industry. Just want to say that, you know, personally, I do think it is beneficial to decriminalize women who are trafficked, of course, but that's not the issue. The issue is calling for full decriminalization, which would basically legalize the exploitation of women, legalize as an industry pimps and johns, basically. So I don't support full decriminalization, and within the trans activist movement, full decriminalization is the only stance you're allowed to have. This is Cecilia Gentili from New York, lead chair of Decrim NY, which calls for full decriminalization of the sex industry. So just wanted to give some examples there that within all of this gender ideology, the only acceptable position on sex trafficking is to make it legal, to allow it. I think there's some connection there with the whole idea that stigma is what kills women, since they're very large, or I should say very actively promoting ideas that stigma is the problem rather than male violence. You can't use correct sex pronouns because that would cause a stigma, and then that stigma would lead to them being murdered, which, you know, you can argue, you can make a strong case that that's not what's happening. For example, a lot of the murders of males who identify as trans are actually a result of the sex trafficking industry that they promote. According to the Trans Murder Monitoring Project, 62% of those killed between 2008 and 2017 were quote unquote sex workers. The next information here is a study showing that women involved in street prostitution are 60 to 100 times more likely to be murdered. So it's inherent to the industry. I can't really understand why trans activists would promote the sex industry, given that so many who identify as trans are killed as a result. So a couple of weeks ago, this American author, Tori Peters, was nominated for a UK Women's Prize in Fiction. Taking a closer look at what this person writes, here's the first novella that Tori Peters wrote, which is available for free on Tori Peters' website, about a young sissy who must choose between her internet fantasy of forced feminization or the difficult reality of transition. So this basically follows a masker convention. For those who don't know, masking is when men put on silicone bodysuits or face masks to resemble women and engage in sex acts pretending to be a woman. This is a quote from the book that was nominated for the Women's Prize. It didn't win the prize, it's just been nominated along with 15 women. It helps that I grew up watching trans porn. I watched way more trans girls getting fucked than cis women. So I think I internalized the idea of trans women with cocks as the hottest, most feminine women out there. So detransition baby, just to quickly summarize, just really quickly, is about two men who identify as trans. One of them detransitions, impregnates a woman. One of the men in the book explains his desire to raise a child by saying that women without children are considered silly little whores, and that he no longer wants to be perceived as a silly little whore. This is another quote from the earlier book I mentioned, The Masker. This one was not the one nominated for the prize, but you can see that it glorifies violence against women as being inherently a feminizing experience. Quote, he slapped me as I had seen women slapped in movies. He could treat me as a vulnerable woman. The thought turned me on. His slap had been the most feminizing thing that had ever happened to me, the most pure, forced feminization of my life. And last quote, this again is from The Masker, the first novella, which I highlight to show the distinction here that really what this is taking the cross-dressing lifestyle or activity, turning it into a form of identification and making it a full-time experience. Why can't I just let my cross-dressing be a fetish? Why does my particular fetish have to take such precedence that I change my whole life, my whole body, just to accord with it? This is an image from Twitter, from a trans-identified account on Twitter. So the reason I'm showing this is because it's really important to understand that those who identify as cissi are not really that different from transgender. And I want to be careful in saying this because I know that, you know, some people will find a lot of what I'm saying to be offensive, but for all intents and purposes, there's no way for anyone to know a difference between someone who has good motivations and someone who is sexualizing women's oppression. And they will take hormones. In some cases, they even eroticize the injecting of estrogen as part of a sexual experience. And for example, a couple of examples of this, hormones make you soft, make you curvy, give you female emotions, whatever that means. And another quote here from someone on Twitter saying that watching trans girl porn made them want to start HRT. A couple more of these kinds of things, just to further back up what I'm saying. Anyone who's interested in this or thinks that I'm overstating this is welcome to conduct their own searches. There's an abundance of evidence like this. So for example, more evidence on social media. Instagram hashtags related to this these are all numbers of thousands of posts. So forced feminization has 40,000 posts on Instagram. All of these other referred to hashtags are related on the same topic. Facebook groups, or I'm sorry, Facebook pages also exist with followers in the tens of thousands. These are harder to track due to a lack of hashtags. They're just harder to find, but in general, you know, they are out there. Sometimes they'll be under a BDSM mistress name, for example, making them harder to find. And Reddit is just a flood in these. I couldn't even count. There were so many, and the majority of them are classified as not safe for work, so involving pornography. I mean, the extent to just how many of these there are on Reddit was really shocking to me. You can just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and see all of these communities. Yeah, in the hundreds of thousands. I put at the top here traps. So I should probably explain that a trap refers to a man who passes as a woman so convincingly that even a straight man would want to engage in sexual practices with them. There's also audio. These can be found on YouTube, SoundCloud, basically any site where you would have audio. This is where the hypnosis part really comes in. So it will incorporate audio files claiming to brainwash male listeners. The example I'm using here is called Bambi Sleep, which has got the tagline Deep Bimbo Erotic Hypnosis, and says Bambi Sleep is for anyone that wishes to become a sexy bimbo girl. The files are not specific to what gender the listener is. However, it's pretty clear to me, I think pretty obvious, that this is targeting men. And this is a description from the website. Bambi loves to wear high heels, tight clothes, and perfect makeup. Left to her own devices, she will alter her body with large implants and lip injections. I actually listened to one of these on YouTube, and they go on for hours. The one I was listening to goes on for 2 hours. I couldn't listen to the whole thing. It really is done in the format of hypnosis with counting down, repeated mantras. And I do wonder if the mantras in transactivism refer back to this type of hypnosis, pornography, both. So just as an example of how lucrative this can be, Bambi Sleep currently has 674 subscribers who pay at least $5 a month. So whoever creates this content is earning at minimum $3,300 each month from it. So within all of this is the misogyny, the idea of woman as a sex object, but especially being degraded as a woman, humiliated as a woman. A common theme that I've seen in looking at this is these men being turned on by being objectified, by being the object of misogyny, experiencing misogyny. And yeah, I think it plays really well into the argument that trans activists support the sex industry because it actually validates their idea of what women are and what they are for. There are also all of these kinds of erotica and manuals that you can find on major bookseller sites, including Amazon, which recently banned books critical of gender ideology, and also on Walmart. The title of this one is Feminization from Alpha to Sissy Due to His Inadequate Sized Manhood. That's another theme or subgenre, I should say, where if the man has anxiety about the size of his genitalia, then he needs to transition. And part of the excitement is being made fun of, mocked, humiliated, and exposed as having a inadequate sized manhood, I guess. This is one that's found on Amazon, Sissy Cult, First Time Feminization, Transformation, Sissification. The author's name is Jane Futa, which Futa is also another type of transgender pornography. This is a manual of forced feminization found on Amazon. And I really wanted to highlight this for the language that it uses, which is language found in the quote unquote manosphere, or incel language, basically. If you continue to live as a beta male, you will be destined to a life of celibacy and sadness. When you become a girl, you'll have lots of sex. All girls do. The real mark of anyone who truly admires female beauty isn't simply a desire to possess it, to have a girlfriend or a wife, to have sex with a woman. Your love is greater. You want to become a woman yourself. There is nothing wrong or even unusual about this desire. And thanks to modern technology, it's increasingly possible to make your dreams come true. It goes on to say, in fact, a great transition is taking place in our larger culture as well. Beta males are becoming softer and more feminine, while women are becoming more assertive and confident in our sense of sexuality. I really can't blame you for being jealous. I wouldn't be happy as a beta male either. You probably get rejected by girls all the time, all while you are forced to watch them on dates with alpha males. And you know that they are having lots of amazing sex, the kind you will always be denied, or you'll be forced into a life of humiliating celibacy unless you accept your fate as a sissy. So yeah, again, pointing out the alpha male, beta male language, which is seen within incel rhetoric on forums such as 4chan. So there's not a lot of research about what I call the trans to OnlyFans pipeline. However, just anecdotally from looking at social media accounts, it seems to be an increasing phenomenon. Transgender porn is increasing in popularity and in 2018 was ranked the 5th most popular search. I believe that this is causing a feedback loop of porn addiction and then entering the porn industry and becoming the content creator, becoming the pornography. And I do think that this is why the mantras of the transgender activism, such as trans women are women, sex work is work, and don't kink shame, they all have a similar vibe to them. You'll see the same kinds of people supporting all three of these mantras or ideas. Many who oppose gender ideology argue that it reduces women to an embodiment of gender stereotypes, but I believe the truth is far worse. Gender ideology reduces women to pornography. For many, gender identity is BDSM, rebranded as a full-time lifestyle. Women's humanity is stripped away, our lives are flattened to a fantasy of sexual submissiveness. Through gender ideology, women's existence, our bodies, and our experiences are broken down into parts for men to fetishize. One of the biggest problems with this, of course, for women is not only the erosion of the definition of women, but the fact that these men are dangerous. Being men, you know, of course, people say not all men. That's something that I really find frustrating because the concern here is far greater than men's feelings. This is from a study published in 1989 called The Presumptive Role of Fantasy in Serial Rape Homicide. Quote, fetishism and transvestism are more often associated with sexual aggression than other paraphilias. 88% of the fetishists also engaged in either sadomasochism or transvestism. Sadomasochistic fantasies may be premonitory signs of extreme dangerousness, including sexual murder. Not only is transvestism associated with other paraphilias, but it may go hand in hand with violent sexuality, end quote. So on this note, I want to refer listeners to the website womenarehuman.com as well as transtimuk.com, both of which track crimes committed by those who are regarded under the trans umbrella. Stonewall UK, for example, defines trans as including cross-dressers, cross-dresser being the more slang or casual term for what's called transvestism. Sissy Hypno differs from mainstream pornography in that it addresses the viewer and gives instructions, deliberately wielding the power of the medium in an attempt to alter one's self-identity and encourage dysphoria. Multiple studies across decades have demonstrated a correlation between pornography viewership, sexist attitudes towards women, and increased instances of violence and sexual assault. The regions of the brain activated by pornography are the same regions activated as though one were actually engaging in intercourse due to the brain's mirror neurons. Marco Iacoboni a professor at University of California, Los Angeles, proposes this is why pornography has a strong impact on our minds, including the potential to encourage violent behavior, saying, quote, the mirror mechanism in the brain also suggests that we are automatically influenced by what we perceive, thus proposing a plausible neurobiological mechanism for contagious violent behavior, end quote. So these are my words now. Recent studies have shown that pornography can hijack the brain's dopamine reward center. As pornography results in sharp outbursts of dopamine, the brain develops tolerance to the content, requiring more shocking media to elicit the same thrill. As a result, pornography can lead to sexual dysfunctions and depression. In addition, there is some research to suggest that consuming pornography can lead to body dysmorphic disorders, and in particular, penis dysmorphia among men. Given that gender dysphoria is a type of BDD that is characterized by unease with primary and secondary sexual characteristics, it follows that pornography can distort self-perception and reasonably be assumed to induce gender dysphoria rather than simply drawing it out as a pre-existing condition. It used to be taken as undisputed fact that the media we consume can shape our minds and behavior. Yet as our lives become ever more media saturated, our ability to think critically about its impact on identity and selfhood have been constrained and often reduced to individual rather than societal observations. We must therefore consider the recent extreme popularity of claiming a transgender identity as connected to the tremendous rise in online streaming pornography and its accessibility. The phenomenon and trend is too great to ignore. And I just want to end this with a quote from J.K. Rowling, which I thought was really nice and inspiring. Her words and her bravery on this issue have been inspiring for a lot of women who have vocalized concerns through various means, for example, on social media, in order to support her. So she's brought a lot of awareness to the issue. She says, quote, I refuse to bow down to a movement that I believe is doing demonstrable harm in seeking to erode woman as a political and biological class and offering cover to predators like few before it.
Thank you, Genevieve, for that really thorough explanation.